Would you please give a warm welcome to Philip Shepherd?
Thank you so much. Everyone can hear me okay? I can hear it. There's a nice resonance in the room. I am so looking forward to sharing things that are close to my heart with you about how I understand embodiment, how our culture sways us to disembodiment. There is a wound that is inflicted on us all that we carry that I'd like to talk about. We misunderstand, I think, the nature of our fundamental intelligence. And I'd like to finish with a Q&A. So if questions pop up during the talk, please hang on to them and we'll address them at the end. What I'd like to start with, though, is something a little more personal. Embodiment has been my North Star in my life. Ever since I was a teenager, I've been drawn back to the body. And that's been complicated by the deeply entrenched message of disembodiment that lives through our culture. And every culture is a story. And every culture tells a story about what it means to be human. And the story our culture tells us, in its overarching message, says that thinking happens in the head and the body is the vehicle. And you may have a sense that that's a somewhat modern or recent story. Well, it's not. In our culture, it's ancient. You go back to, there's a dialogue by Plato called Timaeus. And in the dialogue, this very wise man, Timaeus, is asked, how did the gods fashion us? His answer was, first, they fashioned this divine orb based on the spheres of the heavens. And then they realized this divine orb wouldn't be able to get around, so they grew it a vehicle, arms and legs and a trunk. So here we are, 350 BC, and the body is being described as a vehicle, and the head as our most divine part. And it goes back further than that. I think, for me, the origin of our disembodiment lies in the Neolithic Revolution. So the Neolithic Revolution was when we moved from hunter-gatherer cultures to farming, agriculture, domesticating animals. And there was a massive shift in our understanding of who we are with the Neolithic Revolution. So prior to that, cultures, villages were gathered around the mother, and they revered the earth, and they saw the goddess manifest in every leaf, in every insect. And then we started to move from coming into harmony with the world to controlling it, to controlling our food supply, which became a monoculture. And suddenly, certain plants became weeds, and certain animals became vermin, and we shifted our allegiance away from the earth to the sky, and away from the goddess to the gods, and away from the mother to the father, a shift that we're still in the grips of today. More essential for me than those shifts in idea was a shift, a fundamental shift in how we live in the body. So in the late Paleolithic, early Neolithic cultures, there's lots of evidence that we experienced our thinking in the belly. It shows up in art, it shows up in language, like the Proto-Indo-European roots of language show that navel was the hub. There's an English word, nave, that no one ever uses, but it means the hub of a wheel. And it goes back to this Indo-European root for navel. And in that transition, our center of awareness began to rise through the body. So I feel the belly, this lower part of the body, as the female pole of my consciousness. And I feel the intelligence of my head as the male pole of my consciousness. And you can see the transition up by Homer's day. Homer uses a word, phrene, P-H-R-E-N, or phrenes. It can only be translated with two words in English, mind and diaphragm. This is where they experience their thinking. And there's one translator of Homer who preserves that, Richmond Lattimore, and he'll have a character say, "The mind within my breast understands your words." And then, so there's Homer, 700, 800 BC, and by Plato's day, 350 BC, we were in our heads, and we've been getting more and more abstract ever since. And the extent to which we revere the head and dismiss the body shows up in our language, in our hierarchies, in our institutions, in our architecture, in the way we live in a million ways. So you think of language, and you might say, two heads are better than one. Well, why not two hearts are better than one? But no, the head should be in charge. You want to be level-headed. You want to have a good head on your shoulders. You don't want to lose your head. You don't want to butt heads with someone because, you might get a swollen head if, in all this, where's the body? It just doesn't exist. It's a mere afterthought. Similarly with our hierarchies. In our culture, the leader of every single organization is the head of that organization. It's a bake sale. Who's the head of the bake sale? And you look further back in our language, you look at the CEO of a company, the chief executive officer. Chief comes from a Latin word, meaning head. Captain comes from a Latin word, meaning head. Our economic system, capitalism, literally means headism, from the Latin word for head. And sure enough, capitalism does tend to gratify the values of the head. Our architecture, what's the most appealing apartment you'd want to live in a building? Well, it's the penthouse. And we feel comfortable up there, kind of looking down at the world from that remove of distance. And I personally, I wouldn't want to live in the penthouse. I want to be close to the earth. I want to be able to step outside onto the earth. And our love of the car. What's a car? A head on wheels, right? And it has two headlights because we have two eyes. And, 3 headlights might illuminate the road better, but it would ruin the metaphor because we want to sit inside that car the way we sit inside our heads and peer out at the world through the windshield, the way we peer out at the world from inside our heads. And we feel so comfortable in that familiar space where we can listen to our music that no one else can hear, the way we listen to our thoughts that no one else can hear. We do a head count, and we see how many people are here. We do a body count. How many people are dead? The necktie, this emblematic symbol that is ubiquitous in the business world, draws a line between the head and the body. And the necktie is this promise not to feel or breathe too deeply. And sure enough, in movies, if a character starts to lose it, he loosens the necktie because the promise is shattered. So as a teenager, you can imagine my longing for embodiment in this culture that was insisting on something else led to a certain amount of conflict. In fact, I was at war with my culture in my own way, resisting the patterns, resisting the values. But I felt a little bit like Cuchulainn. So Cuchulainn is an Irish folk hero, mythological hero. And at a certain point, Cuchulainn went into the sea in a rage and tried to battle the waves. And that's how it felt for me, trying to battle my culture. Cuchulainn, by the way, didn't win. And I knew I wouldn't either. So I stood at this fork in the road, basically, graduated high school. And I've been accepted to study physics at the University of Toronto. And then there was this other possibility, which was go to England and buy a bicycle and head off for Japan. And as an 18-year-old, it didn't seem unreasonable that if I got on this bicycle and headed in the right direction and pedaled and didn't stop pedaling, that I would get there. And it turned out I was right. So I spent 2 years away from home traveling. I went through so many different cultures. And on a bike, you're wide open to the world. You sort of feel everything. And every single culture that I went through was luminous. And every culture that I went through was limited, and was easy for me as an outsider to see the limitations of a culture. And every culture I went through was telling a different story about what it meant to be human. So why Japan? Why did I want to go to Japan? When I was 17, I went out of my way. I traveled on a Greyhound bus for 5 hours to get to a city where there was a Japanese no play. So no, if you don't know, no is like a 600-year-old form of theater. It is the most embodied form of theater I've ever seen in my life. Every prayer, every footstep is a prayer. And what I discovered, I studied No for a while, not wanting to be a No actor, but wanting to understand the principles that animated this form. And I discovered hara when I was in Japan. Hara is the Japanese word for belly, but we do it a disservice by translating it as belly, because, in English, belly is this somewhat embarrassing zone that may be prone to indigestion and other things. And in Japan, hara is the source of your deepest truth. It's where you come to rest in yourself, in the world. And what a gift it was for me as a teenager to discover this other possibility. And there are many indigenous cultures that have the same thing. In the Mayan culture, it's understood that we have 2 skulls. So there's the cranial skull, and then there's the pelvic bowl. And our life courses between them. And in the art and the iconography of the Mayan culture, they have the 2-headed snakes, which is representative of this life with 2 heads, with 2 skulls. I like there's an Anangu culture in Australia. And I understand we have 3 intelligences, the head, the heart, and the belly. And they refer to the belly intelligence as the primary intelligence. And their metaphor for the head intelligence is, well, it's like a tangled fishing net. In the West, we knew there was an intelligence in the belly as early as 1910. There was an anatomist, Byron Robinson, who wrote a book called The Abdominal and Pelvic Brain. It was forgotten because there's no place in our cultural story for an intelligence in the belly. And it was rediscovered by Johannes Langley and forgotten. And finally, in the 1960s, Michael Gershon discovered it. It took them, I think, almost 20 years to convince the scientific community that, yes, indeed, what was happening in the belly qualifies as a brain. And he wrote a book called The Second Brain, which I find a curious title because in terms of the timeline of evolution, this is our first brain. The cranial brain is the second brain. But you know, it's slowly come into our cultural awareness. And this idea of two intelligences within the body, two primary intelligences, was finally explicated by Ian McGilchrist. So he wrote a book, I think I could refer to it as a tome, called The Matter with Things. The most brilliant book I've ever read. I spent a year reading it. And in it, he explicates the differences between the right hemisphere and the left hemisphere. And the language he uses to describe those differences is exactly the language that I've used in my books to describe the difference between the head-based intelligence and the body-based intelligence. So the left hemisphere is abstract, analytical, it pulls things to pieces, it's concerned with manipulating the world, it seeks control, it does not recognize wholeness. All it recognizes is parts. It's blind to wholeness. And it is disembodied. It doesn't take stock of the body. And it's convinced that it is right. And then there's the right hemisphere, which does feel wholeness and makes room for the left hemisphere. It doesn't shut the left hemisphere out. It integrates it. And it's concerned not with manipulation, but with understanding. And it is deeply linked to the body. And to understand our nature as one that is pulled between these two intelligences. And what has happened, you know, in Ian McGilchrist's terms, when these hemispheres are in balance, the right hemisphere is dominant and the left hemisphere is in service to it. As I would say, you know, the body is our primary intelligence and the perspectives of the head are in service to that intelligence. And as he's observed in our culture, it's gone the other way around. Now he would say that, and I would say in terms of the body, the meta-crisis that we are in the grips of, the chaos that we've inflicted on people, on the environment, on every aspect of our global health, is a direct result of this imbalance where the narrow thinking of the left hemisphere is in charge and does not see the whole, that cannot see the consequences of its actions. And you know, he talks about the necessity of both of these intelligences. You imagine a pigeon on the ground trying to discern, you know, what are the seeds and what are the pebbles. So it needs a narrow focus to do that. But in the meantime, as it's looking for food, it doesn't want to be food for something else. So there's this other part that is taking in the whole, sort of alert to that. So, you know, there's a necessity for both of them. But this left hemisphere, head-based dominance, is what we live with. It's what we're up against. There's a lot of confusion around our head-based intelligence that shows up in our confusion between mind and brain. You know, people talk about, you know, I got to get my mind around that, and they mean the brain. Mind, from for my purposes, suffuses the whole body. There is no cell in the body that doesn't participate in the thinking of the body. And, the brain, of course, is held in the cranium. And how to recognize within this culture of forgetfulness that thinking of the body. And it's tricky because we are trained. We are diligently, actively trained to discount what the body has to offer. You think of the school system, and you take these young kids, like 5 years old, and they're to sit still in a chair and fill their heads with the right information. So to suppress the body's energy is to suppress the body's intelligence, that there's no other way around it. And if you can't sit still in the chair, you're punished, you get in trouble. And meanwhile, you're to fill your head with the correct agendas and information and strategies. And if you do that well, you're rewarded. So we've set up this 12-year system of reward and punishment that, for my money, has as its overarching lesson, you can think better if you confine your thinking to the head and shut down all that noise below the neck. And I remember, I remember coming out of high school believing that I could solve anything, if I confined my thinking to the head. What that training of our culture results in is a sundering of our thinking from our being. And you might think, well, thinking and being are two different things, but etymology tells us otherwise. There's a Latin word, sentire. Well, sentire means to think, to feel, both. And sentire gave us the English word sense. We still have both of those meanings in our word sense. I might say, I sense something's wrong, in which case I'm saying I feel something's wrong. Or I might say, you're not making sense, in which case I'm saying your thinking is muddled. We have separated our thinking from our being in an artificial way, and that has left a wound within us. Any wound you carry will demand your attention. And the way this wound demands our attention is with our inner dialogue. Dialogue, a conversation between two parties, right? Without inner division, there is no inner dialogue. And I'll give some examples of that, but in discerning between thinking and being, how can we understand the body's thinking? So I understand a thought as the processing of a relationship. Now, I can do that in an abstract way. I can say, what's the relationship between the number 1 and the number 2? Well, you multiply them, it's 2. You subtract 1 from 2, it's 1. You can process that relationship in any number of ways. The body is processing millions of relationships in every second. And many of those turn up as sensation in the body. Any sensation you have in the body is a form of the body's thinking. So to honor those sensations as thinking is to deepen into the body's intelligence. And at the same time, rather than confining thinking to the head, our thinking can resonate through the whole of our being. So as I'm speaking to you now, I am feeling my words. It's like they are rising up from within the body and sublimating and appearing as words, but they're felt. The way I was raised was to speak in a way that was disconnected from that. So I can say a whole lot of really interesting things, and I don't need to feel any of it because I know exactly what I want to say. That hurts. But that's how I was trained, right? But the union of thinking and being is made possible once you recognize every sensation in the body as a form of thinking, and once you recognize that thinking itself can be felt through the whole of your being. So it may, we have habituated to the inner dialogue, that running commentary. And it may seem absurd to suggest that there's any other way. If we turn to indigenous cultures, we find something else. So there is an elder in the Yunangan nation. The Yunangan nation lives, there's this whole archipelago that trails off Alaska towards Russia, separating the Bering Sea from the Pacific Ocean. And this culture has lived there for 10,000 years. And there's an elder, Ilarion Merkuliev is his name, who was raised in the traditional Yunangan way. And he speaks about, as a child, sitting with the hunters on the rocks. They were hunting sea lions, and they had a sacred relationship with the sea lion as the Plains Indians have with the buffalo. And they would sit there for hours, and they weren't daydreaming. They weren't lost in thought. They were just attuning. And at a certain point, one of them would say, "Sea lion coming," and all the heads would turn and look in the same direction. Now that sea lion could be 5 or 10 miles offshore. It's not that they see the lion, it's that they feel its presence. And Ilarion talks about wondering how the hunters, you're by the sea, the gentle lapping waves, how do you not start daydreaming? And he explored that for himself. He was under a cliff one day with all these, like thousands and thousands of birds, and they were all flying together, but no bird ever clipped the wing of another bird. And he was a child. I think he was 7 when he observed this. And he said, how is it possible that they're never hitting each other? And his conclusion was, it was possible because they weren't thinking. And he trained himself to go for hours without one thought going through his head. And he will tell you today, he's written in his book, Wisdom Keeper, true intelligence is a state in which there are no thoughts going through your head. There is an attunement of the body to the world that feeds on the information that is there with a subtlety that the conscious mind can't begin to touch. The body processes more than 1 billion times the amount of information than we can be consciously aware of. And you can't necessarily recover that in an objectified way, but you can feel it. In the same way that you will never know wholeness, not objectively, but you can feel the whole. There are other indigenous cultures that show the same thing. One of my favorite stories is Jeanette Armstrong, who was an elder in the Okanagan Nation, talks about being on a hill in the reservation, sort of looking down at the white man's village. And she's there with her grandmother and her father. And they're just quietly looking down, and the grandmother says, "You know, those people are insane." Now, in the Okanagan language, the word insane translates literally as talking inside the head. And the repetition of talking implies that there is an argument going on. That is her definition of insanity. There's another indigenous culture that I've learned much from. Robert Wolfe wrote a book called Original Wisdom, and in it he talks about his time with the Sungoi, this Malaysian culture, indigenous culture. And much of the book is about his journey of learning from them. And he was mystified by this culture because, he'd decide on a Saturday morning to go visit them and spur of the moment, drive for a couple of hours, walk for an hour and a half along a path towards the village, and there'd be somebody there to meet him who would stand up and show him into the village. He eventually learned from Ahmed, took him under his wing and taught him. Ahmed could feel a snake before it was ready to pass across the path they were on. He could feel its presence. He could feel water when they needed to drink. And he took Ahmed to the ocean. There is no ocean. There's no word for ocean in the Sungoi language. And Robert was going back home for a night and then was coming back to the village. Ahmed joined him. And Robert woke up in the morning to see Ahmed standing 100 yards from the ocean, just standing. And when they got back to the village, Ahmed told the village, "I have something very important to tell you. We'll gather tonight." Ahmed stood up in front of the villagers and said, I saw the ocean. And it's not dangerous like our rivers that swell and can swallow you. It stays there. But there are giant creatures under there. There are creatures with wings that move through the water. There are currents, and these fish ride the currents. And he described the mountains, bigger than any mountains we have, with deep, deep valleys. He described the ocean, having stood 100 yards from it and simply felt its presence. This is the intelligence that we've forsaken by moving into the head. This intelligence of the body, just to give it some context, is 3 billion years older than the intelligence in the head. So on the timeline of evolution, the head, the brain, appeared 521 million years ago. But life appeared more than 3 billion years before that. And even the earliest form of life had to be intelligent. It had to find nourishment in its environment. It had to avoid predators, defend against toxins. Life doesn't survive without intelligence. And that intelligence over 3 billion years is with us still. And we're so conditioned to thinking that the brain is the source of our intelligence that I'd love to explore brainless intelligence with you for a moment. And brainless intelligence, there's so many ways of looking into it. One of my favorite ways is with what's called a slime mold. So a slime mold isn't a creature. What happens, there are these individual microscopic amoebas, and they go their separate way until there's some stress in the environment, and then they come together to form this gelatinous mass that can measure time, can navigate mazes, can map out terrain and remember it. It's extraordinary. Now, they don't have a brain, they don't have an organ. There's not a neuron, there's not a nervous system. It's just a bunch of amoebae. And there's one experiment that I'd like to look at. And I've got a slide to bring up that'll help us. So if you look at, this is a time lapse, 0 hours, 7 hours, 10 hours. So look at 0 hours. What they've done, it's a petri dish. And they've got 3 glass discs sitting to one side and 1 glass disc on the opposite side. In the bottom of the petri dish, they put a layer of agar, which is like a gelatin. And then they drop a slime mold into the middle of the dish. And they begin to watch it. And it starts to grow 7 hours. You can see it's growing, 10 hours it's growing. And the little blue dots are just to indicate the points of growth. 12 and a half hours. And then look what happens at 14 hours. It sends out this finger. And it extends through the petri dish to the 3 glass discs. Now, the slime mold is looking for food. It can feel the single glass disc on one side and the 3 glass discs on the other side. Well, 3 is more than 1, so it sends out a finger towards it. Now, there's no contact at 12 and a half hours or 13 hours or 14 hours between the slime mold and the glass discs. It feels their presence. Our survival as a species has relied on our ability to attune to the world and feel it in this way. So, we have this notion that medicinal plants, indigenous cultures will tell you that the plants speak to them, but of course that's nonsense. Obviously, they acquired this knowledge of indigenous plants and medicinal plants through trial and error. So imagine trial and error. John's got a headache. What plants haven't we tried for a headache? Well, here's one. John, eat this. Let's see what happens. Oh no, John died. Does anyone else have a headache? Because we have another 234 plants to try. I mean, this is insane. But this is our approach. It's all we know. We've lost this ability to attune to the world that a simple slime mold without a brain or a neuron is capable of and needs to be capable of, because that's what its survival depends on. Thank you for the slide. So what I'd like to do is characterize the intelligence of the body in a way to differentiate it from that of the head. And there's sort of 5 characteristics that seem really relevant to me. What the body most deeply feels is the present. That is what it attunes to. It's not feeling the past, it's not feeling the future, it's feeling what is here now. Now, what is here now holds the potential of what is to come, holds the memory of what was, but it's feeling this world in this moment. What the body most deeply recognizes is that it belongs. So when I stand before a tree and I feel its presence from my body, there is a sense of kinship. There's a sense of belonging. There's a sense of mutual recognition. And that reminds me of our word consciousness. We think consciousness is something created by the brain in its splendid isolation. The Latin root from which our word consciousness comes means to be mutually aware. Consciousness is born of relationship. And that is what I feel as I come into relationship with a pebble, with a bird song, with whatever it is. There is a sense of belonging. Now, that sense of belonging is as truthful as you can get. We do belong to this world. We are born of it. We return to it. We are part of it. And it's only this intelligence in the head that wants to make us separate, that wants to hold us apart, that speaks of nature as the great outdoors, as though, well, nature, we close the door on nature and live within our homes, and it's out there and we're in here, just as nature is out there and we're inside our heads here. We don't belong. It's a fantasy of the head. What the body most deeply understands is that everything is alive. Like the head wants to say, well, no, it's a stone, it's dead. The body feels its life, and there is beginning in the scientific community, the beginning of an understanding that there is, it's going to sound weird, there is agency in the smallest bits of matter. Primitive, but there's a book called Why by Philip Goff that looks deeply into that. We flatter ourselves with knowing, with this mechanical reductionism that says everything only happens in a linear way. And what we neglect is at the very beginning of our universe, there was the Big Bang. But what about before the Big Bang? Before the Big Bang, there was no matter, there was no space, there was no time, there was no energy. Our universe was born of nothing. By what? By something we don't understand. And that something is with us still, whatever it might be. What the body most intimately knows is that it is embedded in a field of intelligence. It can attune to the world. It can share through that field of intelligence in so many ways. The Australian Aborigines have smoke signals, and we imagine that, like Morse code. No. They would send up smoke when they needed to confer with someone who might be 5 or 10 miles away. And that person would sit down and they would communicate. It's the nature of our intelligence to be situated within this field of intelligence to which we belong. And finally, what the body most deeply understands is that its intimate knowledge of the world is made possible by love. Now, we think of love as an emotion, and sure, you can think of it as an emotion. But for my money, love is our most reliable genius. When you love someone, you know them intimately. If you love the present, you will know it intimately. There's a botanist, very famous botanist in the United States, George Washington Carver, who was actually born in slavery and could work miracles with plants and changed the way the American agricultural system ran. And people would ask him, how is it that you understand what these plants need, what they have to offer. And his response was, if you love something enough, it will talk to you. And that's something the body understands. We are, in moving from the head back to the body, we are moving from an imperative of manipulating the world that is committed to doing into a connection with being that puts the body's intelligence in the forefront rather than in the background. In that transition from doing to being, I think it's helpful to say, well, then what is being? I mean, if we're trying to get back to being, how do you understand that? How do you characterize it? So for me, there are 5 qualities of being that are particularly relevant to embodiment. One of those qualities is fluidity. So, the left hemisphere, the brain in the head, wants certainty, wants things fixed, wants them held down. Well, the reality is everything is fluid. I mean, this lovely podium is in motion. A piece of granite is in motion more slowly than the air in this room, but everything is fluid. And despite their best efforts, scientists haven't yet brought anything to absolute zero where motion would stop. They can't do it. There's always motion, there's always fluidity, and you are fluid. You are 65, 70% water. We are fluid beings. There is an inner ocean coursing through us, and that inner ocean is what makes possible the exchanges that keep us alive. And yet, as we become disembodied, we lose our sense of fluidity. We become locked up, we become compartmentalized. So fluidity, just to understand it, isn't something to achieve. You are fluid. All of being is fluid. The issue then is how to surrender to your true nature, how to surrender to your own fluidity. The second of these qualities is groundedness. You have been at rest on the earth since the day you were born. And yet, when was the last time you felt completely at rest on the earth? Our culture dissociates us from that relationship. We have a value system in our culture that says up is good and down is bad. You're looking up today. We know what that means. There's no ambiguity. In another culture, to say you're looking up today might mean you're looking a little disconnected and flighty. Are you all right? Or you're looking down today in another culture might mean you're looking at peace with yourself and at rest on the earth. How lovely. But no, in our culture, down is bad and up is good. And that's mapping this journey through the body that left the pelvic bowl and rose up into the head and still wants to transcend. Oh, I want to raise my consciousness. And I'm thinking, my goodness gracious, how high do you want it to go? Once in a while, I'll give a talk and somebody will say, what do you want to call your talk? And I say, well, let's call it Lower Your Consciousness. I've got more than a few questions in response to that suggestion. And again, you are at rest on the earth. And we've turned the legs into prosthetics that perambulate us around. There is intelligence coursing through the legs. They are antennae that connect us with the earth beneath. But the earth, as a culture, we have placed hell in Mother Earth. And heaven, to which we aspire in this journey up. So to understand how deeply your neurology has been encoded by this value system of our culture that says up is good and down is bad. And again, recovering that ability, that groundedness, to be at rest on the earth. It's not something to achieve. It's there. It is your reality. It is your embodied reality. How to surrender to that. The third of these qualities is spaciousness. I read recently that if a hydrogen nucleus was the size of a basketball, the electron would be 2 miles away. That gives you an idea of the spaciousness of being. You are mostly empty space, 99.99999% empty space. It is your reality. And yet, our bodies become congested and coagulated with anxieties and concerns. And what I'd like to show you is my metaphor for the body. I think of the body as a resonator. The present is singing through the body at every moment, and the body resonates to it. And what happens in our culture is that spaciousness that makes that resonance possible. Well, we have all these plans and these responsibilities and these regrets and these agendas. So now, the present is still going like this. But we don't feel it. Now, when you don't feel the present in that way, you cannot feel its guidance. And the present, in my experience, is there to guide your next step, your next move. It's there to take you by the hand and lead you forward. When this happens, all you can do is sit in the head and guide yourself. It's all you can do, because we need to move forward. And so then the issue is how to integrate those. I think of them as orphaned energies. We park emotions in the bodies that we're not ready to integrate. And then, the years pass and we get to the point where we can welcome them back. And I think of the pelvic bowl as the center of my being. And when energies are held apart from this energetic center, they leave us in self-conflict. And we live in self-conflict. We live in this state of self-consciousness where our thinking and being are separate, and we take the spotlight of our attention and we turn it off the world and put it onto ourselves, and we start organizing the self. And my definition of embodiment is that embodiment is a state in which the whole of your intelligence comes into coherence with the present. So there are two aspects of that. One is embodiment is a holistic intelligence. And the other is the body's intelligence is in no way separate from that field of intelligence that is the present. And so then, the issue for me is how to integrate those orphaned energies in the body, how to bring them home, that we might once again recover its spaciousness and feel the presence singing through us. And again, your spaciousness is your reality. It's not, let's achieve this ideal. No, let's come back to our true nature. The fourth of these qualities is centeredness. Everything has a center. I can throw the stick up in the air. It revolves exactly around its center. The Earth has a center. The solar system has a center. The galaxy has a black hole at its center. Life tends to move in this dance of complementary opposites, and that often expresses itself in a spiral in nature. And every spiral has a center. And you have a center. And what's happened in our culture is we've tried to displace our center and move it up into the head. And then we wonder why our lives feel off balance. Your center is there. It's waiting for you. It's where you lived as a child. And again, how to surrender the imperative of that intelligence of the head that insists that it's right, that wants to be in charge, and come back to the body, and by so doing, come back to the embrace of the present. And the last of these qualities is attunement. Everything attunes to everything. There's a physicist who determined that if the gravitational field of an electron at the outermost rim of the universe disappeared, it would affect the molecules in this room in such a way that they'd go through about 50 collisions that they'd otherwise have gone through, and then it would miss a molecule that it would have hit. And that takes less than a second. And after that, every collision among the molecules in this room of air would be different. And if you went outside tomorrow and there's some turbulence in the atmosphere, you'd see clouds that would be different. You'd feel gusts of wind that would be different because the gravitational field of one electron had disappeared. Just as the slime mold attunes, we attune. That's the gift of embodiment, is that state of attunement. I really think that as a civilization, if we are to survive, if we are to move forward, we have to come back to what we consider the most secondary afterthought, the intelligence of the body. We need to reclaim that for ourselves and once again learn to harmonize with the world rather than seeking to control it. It's a massive journey. It's a revolution we need that is as radical in its way as was the Neolithic Revolution. And I know that each one of you is helping that revolution. And I join you in that and want to thank you for all your efforts. Thank you. Thank you so much. As I mentioned, we have time for questions. If there are any, boy, I'd love to hear them. And we have a microphone to make it easier.
Question. I'm curious how you. I was very impressed about how you spoke actually, and how you delivered this like very long thing and everything. How do you do that while remaining embodied? Because presumably you practice this a lot of times, and I'm interested in this from a kind of teaching classes perspective. Like, how do you keep it alive, like you did?
So to move from the head to the body, our tendency is to organize ourselves. I think organization is the obsession of our culture. We organize everything. And in my understanding, to be present, the experience of being present is one in which you feel yourself being organized by the present. You are touched by it, informed by it, guided by it. And that transition into being present is one that moves us out of self-consciousness into attunement. And it is a massive shift. It takes humility, it takes trust, it takes courage to take the spotlight of your attention off yourself and dilate it into the world and find the world more interesting than your own thoughts about it. But to come out of self-consciousness, and I mean, that's the division of our thinking and our being. It's like building a prison of self-consciousness, but oh my gosh, what a relief to come out of it, you know, and to feel the attunement that is always there to help us forward. Yeah, thank you.
Questions? She's got a mic. I want to know what you think about this, because I would say the mobile phone has made this issue 10 times worse. I live in a very busy city, Bath, in England, and it seems to me that people can only walk at a certain speed, in a certain direction, a straight line. And if you are making your way across this straight line, what I do is I have a series of hand movements that they don't understand, but they keep out of my way.
I don't own a phone, actually. Yeah, but I have to admit, my wife has a phone, so you know, it's not that. But our hedonist living is titillated, is flattered, is distracted by this device. And you know, artificial intelligence. Here we are the cleverest culture that has ever existed, and we have forgotten how to live intelligently. We forget what intelligence is. And so this promise of access to cleverness through the phone is one that further dulls us to the possibility of attuning to the world and coming home to ourselves. I mean, that's how I understand it. And you know, it's interesting. The reliance on the cell phone has, by its very nature, increased itself. Because try to get a map, you know, a road map. They don't exist anymore. You know, encyclopedias don't exist anymore. You know, so the analog access that we used to have has disappeared. And I think there's got to be a point where we feel exhausted by this shallow titillation and come back to something more nourishing. Thank you. Wow.
Hi. So I work a lot with theoreticians and philosophers and so on, and my experience of all of them is they cannot think if they don't move. And so they will sharpen pencils, they will pace the floor, they will work on the chalkboard and so on. But if you kept them in a straitjacket, they couldn't have a thought. So I think it's, although we think we're all thinking up here, in fact, what you see is something very different. The other thing I'd like to do is just sort of challenge you slightly on your characterization of left and right brain. As we all know, left and right brain represent split our world down the middle. So left visual field is represented in the right plane, right visual field is represented in the left plane. So our whole sensory surfaces are represented half on one side, half on the other side. If we split the corpus callosum, we still have no idea that they're not talking to each other. So, and that's true also of the interoceptors are represented on both hemispheres. So the information that the brain has, it's using it in a very unified way. And this characterization which you gave, and Ian Gilchrist extremely so, of this left and right brain being completely different kinds of things, I think doesn't bear analysis if one just looks at the anatomy.
Yeah, I mean, what I like about the work of Ian McGilchrist is in discerning the differences between the hemispheres, he didn't rely on magnetic image, resonance imaging or brain maps. What he looked at was people with lesions on one side or the other. So he would look at the effect of a lesion on the right hemisphere, which makes the person left hemisphere dependent, or vice versa. And it's as to my way of thinking, as solid a foundation on which to understand the differences between those. I mean, that's my take on it. And I'm grateful to McGilchrist for understanding it's not a separation of tasks between the hemispheres, but the left hemisphere has a different outlook from that of the right, and to appreciate that difference has helped me anyway. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, there's one over here.
This will be our last question. Better be a good one. I want to thank you so much. It was so inspiring, and I have, thank you. Brilliant. So with 4 kids that have all taken gap years after being fully conditioned by our education system in our MAGA crisis, my son, who's on his 3rd gap year, and I'm asking so that he's not just getting a message from me, but he's getting it from you. What would you say to inspire and invite him to go and do what you did? Like the idea to go find out what it is to be human.
Yeah. Just to say, I'm on my 54th gap year. I had a mentor when I was a teenager, and every once in a while he'd say to me, the most important thing is to know what you want. The most important thing is to know what you want. And I heard that at a stage of my life when it was entirely appropriate and life-affirming. I think what happens later, at this point, I'm not moved by what I want. My understanding is that, each of us has a unique cluster of gifts, and the world is whispering to us in every moment to put those gifts into service. And so I feel nudged by the world, called by the world, and to the best of my ability, I respond to that and trust in it. And I don't, in my life, I'm not aware of making decisions. And the word decision, it's related to incision. It means to cut away. And what I do is I drop into the body, and I'm as fully present to this issue as I can be. And at a certain point, the penny will drop. I will just know beyond doubt or ambiguity what the next step is, and to encourage your kids to find that resonance for themselves. It's never led me astray. Yeah, thank you. Thank you, one and all.
Thank you so much, Philip. One more round of applause, Philip Shepherd.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Philip, thank you very much. What a treat for all of us. Please stay in your seats just for one more minute. I've got a couple of things you do need to hear. The first one is very good news. Philip, thanks so much again. That's our third keynote in a row, which is a real hit. We're very lucky today. If you want to stay in touch with Philip, by the way, or know more, his website is, I think, embodiedpresent with a T, embodiedpresent.com. That's correct, isn't it? embodiedpresent.com. All right, so your first thing I need to tell you, good news, you get a slightly longer break now than was in the program. So your next session, don't go yet, but your next session will start at 10:45. That will be back here in this room, and that's a really important conversation, so it would be great if you would all come back in ready to start at 10:45, but you get a little longer break than you were expecting. The second thing I need to tell you is I fly back to London this afternoon, so this is my last set of announcements. I know, it's heartbreaking, isn't it? Just save the standing ovation till I've got through the slides, all right, if you don't mind. What do I need to what's happening? Oh, okay. I thought I was going to get a turn live on stage, and you were judging me so much. Oh, it says thank you. Pleasure. Shall I do these? And then, okay. I've got to say some. I sense my own personal helicopter and champagne minibar is coming, but I've got to do the announcements first. I've forgotten what I was going to say. No, right, back in here, 10:45 for an important conversation. We have this afternoon is free. This afternoon is make your own time up, so time to do what you want, work exchange, etc. And we also have forest bathing, which Michaela has handwritten for me. So the bus departure for forest bathing, if you're booked in for that, is at 1:15. The UCD village, so that's where you checked in, where the very small food court, concession and supermarket is. And it's the entrance beside, what does that say? Centra. It's the entrance beside Centra. What is that? Lost, does that say 20 euros? What is that?
The cost is 20 euros.
Oh, the cost is 20 euros. Right, great. I thought you said you'd lost 20 euros. The cost is 20 euros both ways. So 1:15, meet at the UCD village outside Centra, but you'll see lots of people. Will they just be in bathing costumes, just standing there? You'll spot them, right? Okay. Great. Carol, are there any other announcements that I need to make? What have we got?
40 foot.
So yes, there are more announcements. More slides have appeared. By the way, I know this all seems completely seamless and professional up here. This is not as easy as it looks, let me tell you. So what are we on now? We're on cabaret. Is Andrea here in the room? Yeah, so Andrea's putting together a cabaret for everyone this evening. I think you've got all the acts you need now, haven't you? Is that right? So you don't need any more acts, but she does need an audience. So that will be here this evening. Cabaret's better with an audience. It says the conservatory, but are we in this room, Andrea, or are we out there? We're here in this room, aren't we, I think? Great, lovely. So there's no upper limit. Everybody's welcome. There's plenty of space for everybody, and that starts at 7:30. And then we have, I mentioned this earlier in the week, but just as a reminder, if you need any help or support, or there's anything you need to complain about, there is a resource for you, and there's a process. So you go to I think the website is up there. There it is, atcacio.org. There's a form to fill in on that page, and one of those 3 people will get back to you and look after you. And I think, Carol, just checking with you, that's everything we've covered. Brilliant. All right. So just before whatever this is you're about to do, it's been such a treat being with you. I've really, I've done this before, but this has been a particularly special week. So I want to say thank you to Michael and Michaela and Kamal for inviting me to be part of it. But this seamless, elegant production you see up here does not happen by accident, my friends. So a particular thanks. Carol, you've been amazing. And thanks for looking after me and guiding me so well. And Costa, is Costa here? Is he in the room? Is he anywhere? He's not here. All right, well, Costa's made all these incredible slides that you've seen, all the information, a lot of it at very last minute, but he's made it all happen and work. And finally, our amazing tech team, which today is Owen and Charlie and Caitlin, who are working hugely, hugely hard. Oh, and our film crew. Sorry, yes, they're right. So I don't deal. They're right at the back, but our film crew as well, who've been making all that happen. And that's it. I wish you all a very wonderful rest of the week. And
well, we just want to thank you so much for everything. And a little gift is in the ether for you. He has to decide ether. Yeah, he has to decide what it is.
It's going to come embodied.
oh, okay.
And now we have to take over, and we are not as good as Lee, but we will give our best. And come here. Thank you so much.
Just a very big thank you. He was the man. Thank you.
Have a lovely week.